Hey, everybody. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show.
I love that. We start out with a nice oops.
How you guys doing today, Kelly?
I'm good, good.
I'm in a bit of a windstorm here. I hope you don't mind me.
Look at you.
For everybody watching, welcome to the show. We're really excited to have Mycotoo here today. They're in the green room right now. We'd love everyone who's watching. Just go ahead and click that share button. Invite your friends. We'd love to have a lot of people watching the show. This is going to be a really fun experience for everybody. Dave, you have a little bit of news that happened. You got elected to a board.
Sure.
Give a shout out.
Yes. Yeah. I am now one of the board members of Slice Creative Network, which has just recently opened up its doors to a lot more disciplines. So as before, it was mostly creative freelance individuals. It's now open to a lot of more technical fields, which is my background. And because we're opening the doors to so many more people, we wanted, more board members to, represent a larger section of our members. So yeah. If any of you out there watching haven't looked into Slice Creative Network, please do. It's definitely cool, especially if you're trying to get into the theme and entertainment industry. So.
Well, that's awesome. Well, congratulations. That's
Thank
fantastic. A big love for Slice Creative Network. So we've been doing the congrats are coming in a little bit delayed.
Thank you.
We've been having weekly co-hosts, and today is no different. So we're going to go ahead and bring on Alex Mesa to the team. Hey, Alex.
Hello. How are you guys?
Oh, living the dream, live from Orlando. So yeah, why don't you tell us about yourself before we dive into Mycotoo?
Of course. Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Mesa. I am your recent graduate. I just graduated from the University of Florida in December of this past year, and was very fortunate to get an internship with Disney Parks Live Entertainment as their show writer intern. While I was there, I got to do lots of cool stuff. Got to work on the opening ceremony for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. Got to do some really cool stuff with Disney Dreamers Academy, which I'm very excited because it's getting off the ground again because it was canceled this year. Also got to do some cool stuff in the world of Pandora, and ultimately got to do some really cool things with Mickey Mouse. And now that my internship has ended, I'm hanging out with Upbeat Imagination Workshop and RJ Temple, writing a couple cool new things. And yeah, looking for work and living the dream.
You're muted.
Patrick, you're muted.
Hello. Well, that's why I'm not on the show much anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and toss things to, who do we have first? Kelly. You're going to be walking us through and introducing the group of Mycotoo. So without further ado, I'll be seeing everybody a bit later. And we're going to throw things to Kelly.
Hey, y'all. Where am I? Oh, my gosh. The question for the ages. Hey, guys. Okay, so we have some amazing guests on our show from Mycotoo. We have both of the co-founders. We have the creative director. We have just so much amazing things happening here. So I want to go ahead and introduce the folks from Mycotoo. So if we could pull them on. Oh, there's David, Clifford, Bonnie. Hey, y'all. How are ya?
Good.
So one of the things that we always try to get out there to our audience is like, what is your current role now? And I know that at a company that's so dynamic, you probably all wear so many hats, but like, what's your title? David, can we start with you?
Sure. I'm the co-founder with Clifford and the chief creative officer.
Awesome.
I'm Cliff Warner. I'm the chairman, and I just here for my good looks and charm.
That's the truth.
I'm Bonnie Hallman, and I am Mycotoo's director of creative.
Oh, director of creative. I'm sorry if I misstated. That's
and Uber creative director as well.
We wear many hats. Sometimes I'm the dishwasher, and sometimes I'm in charge of Cliff when he needs to go in the right room.
That's awesome. So now we know like the big picture. Oh, look, Leah. Oh, sorry. We have people pop up, and they're it's just these like wonderful dynamic folks that we just love so much.
That's awesome.
Yeah. When we talk about like your title, everybody has a path that they took to get to that title. So what is, and I know that kind of can be convoluted sometimes because, it's not just like a straight path. There's forks all over the place. So if y'all could share, like, what was your path to your current role?
Well, Cliff and I are both 39 and have been for a very long time. In fact, we've been friends for 40 years, and we went to college together. Personally, I started off in the theater. All of us come from the theater, really, at Mycotoo. That's our foundation. And after studying as an actor initially, I realized there were many people that were much better at that than I was. That was a discovery found in college for all you college students out there. And started to focus on other things that I did a little bit better, writing, directing, producing. And that's where I put my focus when I went to graduate school. And then after finishing graduate school, I went up to Chicago a little bit, worked in a legitimate theater there, and then moved out to Los Angeles, got in the film business for a number of years. And then my friend Cliff kept on trying to get me to come over into the location-based entertainment field, which I didn't even know existed. And I worked with him at another company that he co-founded prior to Mycotoo, worked there a number of years, and then got back into the theater, got into some live entertainment that we'll talk about a little bit later. And then in 2011, we got together when Cliff was no longer with his previous company, and we started talking about what we wanted to do next. And out of those conversations, we founded Mycotoo. That's my story. In 60 seconds or less.
That's awesome. Cliff.
Like David says, we went to college together, but prior to that, my first stage management job was when I was 13, and I was stage managing a bodybuilder show in Venice, California. So, and then I've been stage managing through high school and college. I went to Cal State Long Beach in a tech design program, and then to Yale for stage management, production management, which led me into the film industry because I paid for college working on films. I was fortunate enough to have friends in the industry that kept bringing me to work during my breaks back to LA. And so I went straight back to LA and did film and television for about 8 years. And then during a big strike, I took a position at Universal Studios Hollywood as a stage manager. And after the summer of stage managing, the production manager position opened up, and I applied for it, and I became the production manager for Universal Studios Hollywood, and was fortunate enough to open a new Beetlejuice show and the Waterworld, and then left Universal and ended up at Disney for a year and a half, and got to work on Tokyo Disney Sea and Disney Fest. And then I developed 6 of the live shows at Tokyo Disney Sea. And then went back to Universal to help Universal bring their brand to PortAventura, and spent 3.5 years opening 5 attractions at PortAventura. And that led into me founding ThinkWell with Craig Hanna and Francois Bergeron. And after my tenure at ThinkWell, I wanted to get into more of the development world. And so I left ThinkWell to start Mycotoo with David. And Mycotoo is now 9 years old, and we're very excited about the past 9 years. We've been able to open 2 theme parks in that time, as well as many immersive entertainment activations, and it's been a good run.
That is awesome. That's so great.
And just real quick before you go to Bonnie, also pointing out, because we're on the camera, so we get to talk, but our other 2 partners at ThinkWell, who we'd be completely lost without, are our CEO, Seth Cover, and our Chief Development Officer, Free Forgendum, the amazing Free Forgendum, and our other directors, in addition to Bonnie, Brian Farr, our Director of Production, and Jordan Plasky, our Director of New Business Development.
Oh my gosh.
Not as amazing. Oh no.
No, it's so amazing. Everybody, I'm literally like, I'm so excited to talk to y'all. Okay, so Bonnie, tell us about.
Just like Cliff and David, I also hail from theater. I started as a performer, but I started as a performer very young, and I actually did a lot of touring very young. And when I started getting tired of living out of a suitcase, moved into more the playwriting and directing side. got a concentration degree in playwriting, and actually had a really long, wonderful New York theatrical resume, and was working with Nat Geo, and on a whim moved out to LA and kind of had to start over again. And I met Mr. David Wally. We were both writing for a one act, I guess, play, not competition, but one act play festival, if you will. And
no, I have to stop you and back up beyond that, because that's not when I met you. I met you when you and Brian came and knocked on the door of the Whitefire Theater and said, "We've moved to LA. We will work. We will work for free. We want to work in this town." And so Brian Rasmussen brought you in. Brian became this technical genius there. Bonnie became this stage manager extraordinaire, worked on 2 of my productions. And it was only in continuing to work with them that we realized they were song and dance people. They were writers. They were directors. They were creative directors. They were producers. Who knew from just knocking on the door and saying, "We'll do anything for free"?
Well, it is true. It is true. When I say I had to start over, I'm saying we literally had to start over. Like we had a 20-year New York resume, and my boyfriend at the time, husband now, came out here on a whim. And it was literally like, this was the conversation we had. It was October. Another New York winter was coming. It was like, "Do you want to do winter here again?" No. And then we were like, "All right, whatever. We'll just go there." And so we came to LA, and I was at Nat Geo at the time. So I had a little bit of an in and was kind of working there, but we got here and nobody cared about anything we had done on the other coast. And they were like, "Call us again when you have a LA resume." And so we just started knocking on theater doors, and we were like, "We're here, we'll work for free. What do you need?" And that is how I met David. And then we wrote together in the play festival. And then he actually called me for Dark Harbor. And he said, "I'm doing this thing and I don't quite know what it is, but I think you can help me out with it." And I was like, "I don't know what it is either, so let's do it." And that was 11 years ago. And here we are.
They're the creative version of a Swiss Army knife, both of them.
I love it.
Anytime you need anything, you just pull out a different knife and they can do it.
And that's basically anyone we have at Mycotoo is that. Anyone that would that's kind of what we look for at Mycotoo is we look for Swiss Army knives because we need them.
Yeah, I totally get it. So I know, and y'all know, but our viewers don't know that there's this amazing Mycotoo video that we're gonna watch. But I wanted to introduce y'all first because there's people behind that video. It's not just like, here's an awesome company that sprang from, the ground. This is y'all blood, sweat, and tears. You made this happen. So, I wanted to get to know you first, and then we're gonna watch your amazing Mycotoo video.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
The editing
It's so
stylings
good.
of Free Fortune.
Exactly.
It's so good. Okay. Oh my gosh. I feel like I need to take a second, but I don't want to take a second because I have so many questions that are coming up. So we know that Mycotoo is this amazing company now, but where did it start from? Where did, how did this come to be?
Breakfast.
Yeah, it was a breakfast. I mean, basically, when I decided to step away from Thinkwell, I was looking for what was next, and I knew that I wanted to get into development, but I also knew that I'm not a lone wolf. I'm the king of collaboration, and I feed off the energy of really talented people, and So I reached out to David to see if I'm definitely not a writer. And so adding that as the first thing, and reaching out to David as a very talented writer and a director and a creative producer just made sense. So David and I had breakfast and said, "You want to start a new adventure?" And David said, "Sure." And, you know, he's been stuck with me for the past 9 years. I mean, it's all about, you know, I think that the exciting thing is that I knew that I had a passion for working with creative people, and the idea of taking their ideas and making them real, and the idea of helping passionate people achieve became our vision for myself and for the company. And so the fact that I've done that all my life anyways, it just made sense as the next adventure is to just, you know, live who I am. And David fit into the same mold. You know, David's a true collaborator, knows how to build a team, and, you know, his teams will follow him right into the fire. And so, you know, I think was the exciting thing. And then, you know, having Free come on almost immediately and join the team to help build what is Mycotoo.
Working out of the garage for the first year or so.
Yeah, and then it took me a couple of years to get Seth to jump on his third adventure with me. And so by that time, you know, Seth came on and joined us when we were thrown the task to develop 2 theme parks in Dubai, you know, from our humble garage beginnings.
Going back to the beginning, you know, we always at Mycotoo try to start from the why. There's this great TED Talk that Simon Sinek gave, and he's written a book on it as well, starting with why. And we really love that philosophy of knowing that something has to have a vision that everybody can get behind and wrap their brains around. In a different way, I would sort of refer to it as the one team, one dream philosophy, that you're trying to get everybody to look at the same thing and fight for that same vision and make sure that all the choices and decisions you're making along the way are predicated on that why, that reason for being that's underneath everything. And so we had a good why for the company. We had a good vision, and we needed to come up with a name for it. And I think I sent Cliff 5,032 names, and we said, let's sit down and talk. And then we spent days and days talking. And we wanted to come up with something other than like Warner Wally or Wally Warner or fighting over that thing, and which would be silly because we're not people.
And Wally World had been used, so
that's correct. We wanted to come up with something new, like a Xerox or a Google or a Kleenex or something, a word that hadn't existed before. And we were just trying to rack our brains. And Cliff went out to a lunch and came back and said, you know what, to hell with it. Let's just call it Myco. And I said, Myco? What's Myco? And he said, My Company. And I said, well, then we'll have to call it My Company too. Mycotoo. Wait a second. Hold on. There's something good there. And we floated this idea, Mycotoo, to our friends and collaborators and trusted aides, and asked everybody, what did you think about it? And everybody had a really great response to sort of like how it sounded and also what it meant. You know, Mycotoo, My Company too. It's really the ethos of what we're all about. We want the people that work with us to feel like they're part of our company and that we're part of their adventure. We want our clients to feel that way. We want our partners to feel that way. So it really ended up being something that fit us very well.
And I think the TOO is the most important point in it. And that's really what David brought to the name was, you know, the fact that it's my company also. It's my company too. It's not TWO, it's TOO. And that's really important to me. And obviously important to David. So it works. And it's true to who we are. It's true to our DNA. And we want everybody to feel like they're part of the company. There's no small roles in our company. And that's what I love.
Yeah, it's really informed our relationships with everybody we've worked with over the past 9 years.
That's really such a beautiful concept for a company to value their workers so much. There's a picture that I've seen floating around. And it's from 2013, I've been told.
There it is.
Oh my gosh.
That was our first Mycotoo office.
That was the first 28 people working on the Bollywood and Motion Gate theme park out of my house. You're looking at my backyard.
And to the left of the pool is Cliff's garage, where it was literally our first office. And out of these meetings that started these two projects, we went from 3 people to 10 people to 20 people to 28 people, all working in every nook and cranny of Cliff's property, in the driveway, in the garage, on the porch, out by the pool, in the living room, in the kitchen area.
We used to all like rush. Poor Cliff, he never had any morning time because all of us would try and get there early so we could actually find a spot somewhere on his property.
Yeah.
So if, work didn't technically start till 9 and it was like 7:15. I'm like, hey, are you there?
The door was always unlocked.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. Oh, okay. So from that, you have this litany of things that you've worked on. We've got, I can't even imagine the creative power behind these ideas, because like literally I'm like, holy crap, they did that. Oh my gosh, they did that. Like every time I saw something, it was just blowing my mind. So if you could, and like whomever wants to talk about it, can we walk through some of these?
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about attractions, but Cliff, you should tell the story about how this came to be, because it's a very sort of reverse engineering way of getting something done.
I mean, all this industry is about is the relationships you make. And, I was fortunate enough to get to work with Danny Hardigan at Universal Studios Hollywood, and then get to hire Danny to help write Temple de Fuego for Portaventura. And so Danny and I have had a long relationship, and Danny called us and said, hey, I'm working with this group in Dubai. We pitched a concept around Bollywood, and they accepted the concept. So now we need to figure out how we're going to design it and get it done. And so Seth Cobra and I, looked at it and in 3 days put together a strategy on what it would take and the cost it would take to design, a theme park based on Bollywood. And after the 3 days, we gave them the numbers and the plan, and they said, "Oh, can you do it for us now?" And so, sure, why not? So I mean, basically, Mycotoo became the managing group and we created Riva Creative as an LLC for creating a design team to help design the Bollywood park. And within less than 30 days, they were so pleased on the progress that we were making. And literally, we're going from our 4-person team to adding 28 people to start designing, a blue sky package and a concept package, or taking a blue sky package and making it into a concept package, and then taking it all the way through DD. And so we ramped up fast. We first thing I did was find a general manager to help, manage the human resource aspect of everything. And then we just started getting going and started picking the players that we like working with, and help some people see that they were ready to be a creative director and a producer. And we started building the team, and then they liked what we were doing and asked us to take over the Motion Gate Park. We'd gotten farther along in a month than they had in about 4 months in their schematic package for Motion Gate. And we basically had to take it back into concept refinement because it was over $1 billion, and they only had 750 million to do that park. So we basically had to rethink how to do it to get in the numbers. So we built a 160-person team to deliver not only a concept package, but a schematic package and a design development package. And so we did that all within less than 2 years, less than 24 months.
Yeah, we went from 3 to 10 to 28 to ultimately like 160, Cliff?
Yeah. Yeah, obviously after a couple of months, we had to move out of my house, but it took that much time to find a space. And we finally found a 13,000 square foot empty space in Pasadena that we moved the team in and set up folding tables and started building conference rooms. And, within the month created an office space for everybody to work out of. And we just drove forward, and it was guerrilla design, but it was an incredible team. And it was my geek and geezers plan, where you find a handful of experienced people and you find a bunch of young geeks that really want to work, and mix the two together so that they can all, get the work done and create 2 incredible, very proud of theme parks.
One of the things that we love to do is we love to give people who are ready to make that step forward to the next level an opportunity. And you oftentimes find that those people are so hungry and ready to prove themselves that you can catch a tiger by the tail, and really benefit from everything they can bring to the table.
Bonnie, is that like, can you walk us through how you became a coordinator like with the company and then like moved?
Yeah, I mean, just exactly what David was mentioning is the being that in that mind space and just wanting to prove yourself. At this point, I had already done. I think David won Dark Harbor with you, our first year together. I think
we did the first 2 years.
Was it 2 years after this?
Yeah. Then you quit on me, and then I got you another job, and then you quit on me again. Then I got you another. Did something like that. Just a series of you rejecting me after.
Well, the first time I stopped Dark Harbor is because I went on tour with Shaping Sound, which also came from you, I think. So I did Dark Harbor with David a couple of years, and at this point we kind of were finishing each other's sentences and knew what the other was thinking. And yeah, exactly. And I was on tour I was on the national tour with Shaping Sound, which is Travis Wall's dance troupe. I was production managing that. And David called and said, I've got this thing. It's a Bollywood theme park, and we're looking for coordinators. And I had not done much in this industry. I was a theater and film person, and I was like, I don't know what that is. And it took a couple calls for him to convince me to say, just come in and talk to us. Just come in and talk to us. And I was like, okay. So I came in, and at that point, they had not only had Bollywood, but they had expanded to Motion Gate. And so they were building a Motion Gate team as well. And so I was actually accepted a role as coordinator on Motion Gate. And I was coordinator for a very short period of time. And then they were like, wait, you write? And so I started writing some attractions. Didn't know how to write an attraction. I was a playwright. And so basically found some attraction treatments and said, okay, I'm going to make what I think is a play look like this. And so started kind of learning that the ropes there. And then very quickly, because this Mycotoo group, they offer, like they said, they offer people who are willing to work and earn it opportunities, which is one of my favorite things about this company. And so I very quickly moved into the role of creative director for the DreamWorks portion of the Mycotoo, of the Motion Gate theme park. And then after we wrapped that and they moved on to other projects, came over to Mycotoo as a creative director, and then ended up working into director of creative as we kind of solidified the structure of the company.
As a veteran 39-year-old, it took me a very long time to realize that looking for a job is not always what it's about. Rather, it's looking for an opportunity. And I think that as I listen to Bonnie's tell her story again, so many of these things are about that. It's like identifying that there's an opportunity and just get your foot in the door, and once you get your foot in the door, then you have the opportunity to prove how fantastic you are. I'd been talking about bringing Bonnie in for a long time, and we didn't have an opportunity to bring her into anything until this. And, I made the fatal mistake of being at another meeting when she came in to interview, because I brought her in to work with me on Bollywood. And when I got back from my meeting, they said, we've hired her. She's going to work on Motion Gate. And it's like, oh, okay, that's great. Let her work with somebody else. Fine. And, just like I had fallen in love with her and thought she was incredible, so did everybody else on the team. And then there was the opportunity for her to demonstrate some skills that at that point she really hadn't had the opportunity to develop yet, and rose to the occasion and ended up being indispensable with us since then.
And I think the trick too is what I learned very early on, and I think theater teaches us this, and that's why a lot of Mycotoo people, we all have that foundation in theater. But theater teaches you to be a jack of all trades, usually out of necessity, because you often can't afford the things you need. So it's like, okay, well, we have this, so let's, this person is here and standing here, so now they're a prop master. So, and I think that helps. But I think one of the biggest things that will help you in any entertainment industry is say yes and then learn how to do it afterwards. And that's why I'm here.
And trust that you'll be able to figure it out.
I think it's one of the important things about us at Mycotoo is that we don't hire from a resume. We hire from people's traits. We meet people, and one of my first questions is, what's your gift? What's your natural gift? What were you born with? What's the natural talent you have? Because I think once we know that, we can figure where people fit into the team. And we don't want to hold someone back that has something special to offer to our team. And I think that's where we end up building such great teams, and we're able to deliver, some really amazing concepts and experiences.
Couldn't agree.
Gosh, that's so refreshing. Like everything. Okay, so we have a bunch of cool stuff that like pictures and stuff to show as we talk. So y'all were talking about Bollywood and Motion Gate. Now we're moving on a little bit to Queen Mary's Dark Harbor.
So some of the people that I'd worked with Cliff at his previous company, we worked on a project that ended up going on pause after the economic collapse and had to be put on hold for a little while until it started back up again. They ended up making it Warner Brothers Abu Dhabi. And on that project, when I was a creative director there, I worked with a couple of guys, Sam Russo, who was a producer, and Tom Clough, who was going to be the show director for the land that I was the creative director. And I had a great time working with them. And they called me up in early 2010 when I had done the only sensible thing a human being could do in an economic crisis. I went back to the theater and wrote and directed and produced a couple of plays. I made $6 on one and lost $600 on the other one. So I'm the most successful theatrical producer in Los Angeles. And they asked me to come down and talk to them about this new project they were doing at the Queen Mary. And it was a new Halloween haunt that was going to replace the previous Halloween haunt that had been in the ship. And I was like, great, what is a Halloween haunt? And I had no sense of what it was. And they said, well, it's going to be, do you know what Not Scary Farm is? No. Do you know what Halloween Horror Nights is? No. Okay. Do you watch horror movies? Not really. Okay. Come down and meet with us. You're going to like it. You're going to have a good time. I was like, okay. So I went down and I met with them and got a sense of what they were doing. And it was going to be this Halloween horror event that took place on and around the ship. And I worked on it with them for a while and had auditions and met the actors and stuff. And what I came to realize was I had no interest in doing a Halloween haunt. But what I wanted to do was what it seemed to be the opportunity was, which was to direct this grand operatic scale piece of immersive theater in which we could take the audience and we could take the performers and have them interact with each other in the same physical space. Now, once I realized that's what I was doing, it became a fascinating creative challenge. And the process of doing it with Bonnie and Tom and Sam and everybody else who worked on the project, it ended up being one of the funnest gigs that I ever had in my life. And that was in 2010. And in spring of 2011, we were still trying to figure out if we're going to do Dark Harbor again a second year or not. And the team got together and we were having drinks, and Sam got a text that told him that Cliff Warner had just decided to leave Thinkwell, which I had no idea was going to happen. And I called Cliff and said, how you doing? And he said, we should get together and have breakfast. And, in June, we sat down, had breakfast, started thinking about starting Mycotoo. And then we went into the second year of doing Dark Harbor as the team that ran the ship at that time decided to do a second year. And lo and behold, the second year moved to the third year, to the fourth year, to the fifth year. And suddenly 10 years later, we've done 10 of them. And each year growing the product and growing the creative juices that we're allowed to play around with there, and growing the audience and growing the return on investment. So it's become a big piece of business and one of the most successful Halloween haunts in the area. And out of our work in that, we gained, like anything you do, if you do it often enough, you gain expertise in the field. And Bonnie and I, other members of our team as well, have done so many of these now that, we've been brought on to work on other Halloween haunts as well. We designed the biggest maze that Six Flags has ever done after Math 2 Chaos Rising up at Magic Mountain a few years ago. And then we designed and also ran talent for Horror Made Here at Warner Brothers. Bonnie ran that event for us while I was doing Dark Harbor. And then last season, the Dark Harbor team, Urban Commons, our friends at Urban Commons, our friends at Epic Entertainment, who we work with on these events, after many years of trying to do a second sister production. We finally did it last year in Orlando, an event called Dark Horizon. So we ended up having to split our team in two, and half the team stayed behind in Long Beach and did Dark Harbor, and half the team went to Orlando and worked on that. And I was the executive talent director for both events, flying back and forth.
Oh my gosh, those pictures are so great. The head in the jar.
that head is in a jar in every year. Every year it's
moved around the event.
A different maze, and if you know to look for it, you can find David Wally's head in a jar.
That's awesome. Okay, so now we're to South by Southwest World.
So, as we've said many times before, Mycotoo, my company too, we like to feel that we work with other people, they work with us. Before Westworld, a company called Giant Spoon had come to us and asked us to do a brand activation, never heard this term before, for a project they were doing at Comic-Con down in San Diego for Blade Runner 2049. And so our team worked with them, providing the immersive theater aspects of the thing, the actors, the costumes, the makeup, operation, running the theatrical elements of the show. And we had a great time working with them. It was very, very successful. And we learned a great deal on that, both our company and I think Giant Spoon as well, in terms of what the opportunities were to really immerse an audience in the world of an intellectual property. And it was the type of work we'd done at theme parks before, that we'd done at Dark Harbor. But it was immersing them in a wholly different way, and that people felt like, Dark Harbor is, or Halloween Haunt is, you sort of know that you're at an event, you're at a scary event. When you're at a theme park, you're at a theme park, you see people who are sort of dressed up, like characters, but you sort of still feel like that you're in a theme park. These situations, first with Blade Runner and then spectacularly with South by Southwest, is you really felt, I feel like you were inside the movie, you were inside the television show.
Oh my gosh.
Giant Spoon and HBO had found this this incredible ghost town outside of Austin, guests had to travel a half hour to get to our site. And on the sort of decayed edifices of most of the ghost town, they rebuilt new facades that looked exactly like the show. And they brought in the train that's used in the show. They brought in the player piano that was used in the show. And we were tasked with sort of creating the world, the story, and the script and the characters, and then casting the characters and working with them, staging it, costumes, and all of that. So I think we're going to talk about it a little bit more later in terms of some more of the details, but it ended up being a fantastic project for all of us, our team, all companies involved. It was huge for HBO. It was huge for Giant Spoon. It was huge for Mycotoo. And really one of those events that you look back on and, know that that's a benchmark, that you've set for yourselves. And I think in this case, to be set for the industry.
Completely. It's, just to be there, it's amazing. Is this around the same time where, you're working with Game of Thrones?
Game of Thrones, again, the nice thing is that when you have success with people and you enjoy working with them, sometimes they ask you to come back and work with them again. And that was the case with Game of Thrones. It was back at South by Southwest, back with HBO, back with Giant Spoon. And we created this very different attraction for this one, a different brand activation. The Giant Spoon and HBO got the Red Cross to come involved. So there was a blood drive aspect to this that wasn't just in Austin, but around the world. So they had a record-setting blood drive to help with the campaign, which was called Bleed for the Throne. Giant Spoon developed this wonderful walkthrough RFID attraction where you could experience touch points of the series throughout the years. We brought in a beautiful music composer, William Kempster, who took the music of the show and created a half-hour oratorio that had 4 tenors and 4 bass and 4 altos, 4 sopranos, 6 musicians, and David Jacobson and Bonnie sort of really spearheaded that element inside the building that we were doing there, that created one world that was sort of like in the Lannister world. And we had these red priestesses who would give people these wonderful pins that welcomed into the army of the living. And then as guests exited the building, they came out side to something that was a little bit more akin to the Westworld. There's the pin. That was more akin to the Westworld experience, which was an outdoor war camp of, Stark soldiers and Dothraki and free folk, wildlings, and Fabrosi. And so we had people that were sword fighting and people who were telling stories and people who were getting in disagreements with each other who were all preparing to do battle. And guests were able to engage with them and go on stories and go on little adventures and tell stories with them. So it sort of brought the whole world to life. The difference between the two projects in specific is with Westworld, that the ask from HBO, from the showrunners from Giant Spoon, was they wanted to create this big world that paralleled the events in the show. Not the people that are in the show, because we're not going to pull off Maeve or Dolores or Teddy or Dr. Ford, but people who were maybe out of focus, around the corner, off screen, then became the people that were at the fore of our activation, who knew all those people, but really created a lot of stories for all of those characters. That's the last thing that the Game of Thrones team wanted, because they already had 8 years of lore with the television series and all of these books that George R.R. Martin had written. It was like, don't create any new story. So what we had to do was take it from a writing standpoint of the characters that you saw in our story were people that had been present at the events that you'd seen on screen. So there were people who were there during the Battle of the Bastards. There were people that were there at Hardhome that had witnessed things, the events of our heroes from the television show, that could talk to people about what it was like to be there.
Wow. And it's these relationships that, led us to things like Paisley Park, where we're getting to work with the estate of Prince, for trying to create an immersive entertainment experience that would allow us to tour through the studio and soundstage, and second home for Prince. And it was David's relationship that one of the guys from Giant Spoon recommended us to the estate, and we got to go out there and sit with there and meet with them and talk about the importance of figuring out what the true vision for the property was and how do you address something, and when we started with this, it'd only been about 18 months since he'd really passed. And so there's still a lot of sensitivity, and there was a lot of things that had to be taken into consideration. But it's, for us, it was exciting to step into Prince's world and then think about how do you going to allow a guest to come visit the property. Prince had built this back in '87 to be his own studio. There's three recording studios within the building, and a full sound stage and a club area that he can open up at night to his friends to come see bands that he likes.
And he lived and worked there.
Yeah. It wasn't his primary home, but he definitely had an apartment, 2 apartments actually in that building. Yeah. But, and it was where he stored his cars. It's where all his, there's a vault where all his music was being stored, and all, and it's just the costumes and the guitars and, so it's an incredible thing to get to come in and be a part of. And we're really excited about our relationship. They just put the new
love symbol,
and, we have one created to put out in front of the building because it was a very nondescript and on purpose for Prince at the time, building. It's a beautiful building that, he personally designed. And so it has beautiful landscaping around it, and just adding the Prince symbol as a token of love and respect to Prince, and allow people to come and be able to bond with something and have a moment and take a photo with it. We found really exciting. And so we're excited about our relationship with them. We're continuing to help develop where the tour is going to go. And so it's these kind of things that make our company keep rolling forward.
And Free and Seth and some other people on our team, Nicole and Devin and Josh, really did the lion's share of the work on this one and had just done a fantastic job.
Yeah. So Cliff, you actually answered my question before I could even ask it. I love that. It's like you're in my brain, because I was like, I have no idea what Paisley Park is. And so you just very succinctly, wonderfully, beautifully answered that question. So now from Paisley Park, we have another project that y'all worked on, Dig It. that big fan.
So we talked, let me tee it up for Cliff a little bit. We've talked a lot about the live stuff that we do with Westworld and Dark Harbor and Game of Thrones and stuff. And then we talked about it, sort of our design services, things like Paisley Park, Bollywood, Motion Gate. This third branch, this third leg that Cliff talked about wanting to get into when we started Mycotoo is development of new properties, and working with partners on to do that.
Yeah, I think it became important that when starting Mycotoo, we didn't want to just be a design service. We love doing it, and it is an important part of our business, and it is part of our who we are. But at the same time, there's a point where you realize we should be designing some stuff that we could own and operate, and we started doing that, and we started learning about the world of finance, which has been challenging, and the world of of real estate and land development. And these have led us to, and as word got out that we were doing this back in November, Mark Pyra and Tim North from It Attractions approached us and said, hey, we have this concept we opened 2 years ago in Dubai called Dig It. And it's basically a children's play space that had a very reasonable capital cost to open. And Mark and I go back a long way. We have a lot of respect for each other. They built a lot of the stuff in Dubai, their shop, back in the day, Paragon, and built the stuff in Dubai. And, and we had a trust for each other. And he said, would you be interested in licensing Dig It for North America? And when we all looked at it, we loved the concept. We loved the play aspect of it, the fact that it's a construction site. The mini digger, I want one in the office. It's just, it's a digger that digs in a ball pit, and it's the best use of a ball pit is don't put kids in it, just let them dig the balls. There's less cleaning, and it's just, it was a quaint, sweet idea, and we're not above, working with someone else's idea. I think that's the key is we just respect that it's a great idea. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to jump into the world of owning and operating. And we hope by April to be able to open our first one. And so we're in the middle of negotiating a site. We had great response. We had over 120 landlords approach us about Dig It once we put the word out about it. We narrowed it down to about 20, have had great meetings with the 20 that are here in Southern California, and we'll narrow it down to one, but we'll basically over the next 5 years open at least 20 of them. And we're excited about this opportunity. It's going to be a new division for us. And so, it'll be fun, and it'll lead to others. We have other concepts that this will allow us to step into. And I think that's the key. We have to grow. I've been doing design and production for 20 years plus. Waterworld opened 25 years ago in October. And Portaventura before that, or just after that. So in those things, I think that as a professional, this is the next generation for me as a creative lead. This is a new opportunity. And so we're excited, and we're continuing. It's just all been a good run.
Wow. Well, I know I could quite literally just be talking to you guys all day, but Alex has some amazing questions of her own. So I'm going to throw it to Alex. I'll see you all later. Thanks so much. And talk to you soon.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, Kelly.
Hey, Alex.
Hi, guys. How we doing? So we're going to be talking about Westworld and doing a deep dive into that project. Now, I am no stranger to fire alarm deadlines and short timelines and working quickly, but I know Westworld is this revolutionary, insurmountably huge project. We talked about it a little bit briefly, but do you mind giving me a quick explanation as to what it was in the process?
Sure. So, again, one thing that we do many things great. One thing that we're not a marketing agency. Giant Spoon is a marketing agency, and their core business is to work with IP holders to market their IP for special events and special occasions. So in the case of Blade Runner, it had been teeing up Blade Runner 2049 at Comic-Con in anticipation of that movie being released. The gentleman that I worked with on that brought us in was a guy named Patrick Jong, wonderful guy, great producer. And we worked with Bonnie and I, and the rest of our team worked with Patrick on Blade Runner 2049. And a number of the people we used on that project had been in Dark Harbor. So the following October, Patrick came to see Dark Harbor, and all these characters who had worked with him on Blade Runner 2049 were now in horror makeup and different costumes, and he didn't know who anybody was, but they all know who he was. And they spent the night just terrorizing Patrick. And he had a great time. And on the way out the door, he said, "Hey, I might have another project for you." I said, "Great, give me a call." And a few weeks later, he called me and let me know that Giant Spoon was working with HBO, and they had come up with this concept to create the town of Sweetwater, the main Western town that exists in the show, for the South by Southwest Festival. And Patrick said he was not going to be working on that. The New York office was going to be working on it, and introduced me to a gentleman named David Jacobson, who was the executive producer on that project. And I had worked with the LA office, who was fantastic, Mark Simons and John Haber, who were the partners there. On Westworld, got to work with Trevor Guthrie, who's one of the partners in New York. And so the first thing that we had to do was sort of collaborate together to figure out, like, what does that really mean? What is creating the town of Sweetwater? And worked with all members of their team, people who are working directly with HBO, people who are interested in this aspect of marketing, that aspect, people who are producing. And our job was to sort of write the story that was going to stitch this all together and figure out who the characters were, where they were going to take place on this property, which was 2 acres big, and who were going to sort of anchor different locales within that 2 acre property that they were designing to. They were recreating the Mariposa, they were recreating the Coronado, creating the sheriff's office, blacksmith's office, general store, banker's office. And so we had to sort of figure out, like, who were those kind of archetypes that might be there, and create a cast size that we felt like the budget could support and really provide enough people to interact with. And one of the things that we came up with was that we didn't want to just anchor people in these places. We really also wanted to have people moving through town, so that it really felt like this was an actual small Western town. And so we also knew that we wanted to embrace the notion of where the show was back then, which was populated by these hosts, these robots, who had gotten off of their loops, and they were having these reveries as they were challenging who they thought they were, which was real people, and coming to realize that they were robots. And, each of these hosts every day had a loop that they were on, and Dolores had the loop that she'd do every single day. So we decided to create 90-minute loops, and those 90-minute loops, accounted for an hour of an actor's time and a half hour of the actor's break. And we had to figure out how those things interstitched with each other through time for an hour and a half, repeating 6 times a day, culminating with a climactic scene each loop, that then generated people back into the storyline. So just the creation of just sort of that big Uber structure was a tremendously big ask. And, coming off of this very, very popular season of the show that could have been fraught with all kinds of creative entanglements. But the thing that was fantastic about it was that the Giant Spoon team had great trust in us, and the HBO team had great trust in Giant Spoon. And as we submitted our work to them to say, are we on the right track, their response, that also came with some notes and some tweaks they want to make, but the overall to it was yes, and keep going deeper, see if we can be more ambitious. And they encouraged us to keep trying to be more ambitious and extend the boundaries of what we thought we could do. And the conversation turned into, well, let's have real horses there. And the conversation came to, well, the costumes really need to be authentic, even if it's going to cost a little bit more money. That's important. And we're doing this Western. How can we really do this Western if people don't have guns, on their side, and gaining approval for that? And then if guns are on the side and we're building to a climax, how do we really do that without having at least one gunshot? And so all of these things and all these decision points had to be, thought through and created and then tested and vetted before people said yes to it. So we were able to do all that while in conjunction also figuring out, okay, who's actually going to do this though? Who we knew who our supervisory team would be. We knew that Bonnie and myself and Tara and Lila would go out to Austin. Our costumers would go out to Austin and manage it. But who are the actors going to be? And one of the first things that Patrick said to me was, you can't take all of your people out there. It's financially impossible to do that. But moreover, we really want to have an authentic look. We want people from Austin, Texas, to be the denizens of this Western town, which made complete sense to me. And so we went out and we first held auditions, tapes that were sent to us that we were able to identify who we really responded to. And then we went out and did a casting session, myself, the Giant Spoon people, the casting director, and saw all these people live in Austin. And one of the tricks that Bonnie and I learned with Dark Harbor when you're dealing with such a gigantic cast is the best way to gain their buy-in is to memorize their names. And so that way, when you go in day one, you know who everybody is. Well, I did this for the auditions. So when people were coming to auditions, I knew each of their names as I greeted them before they introduced themselves to me.
Good on you. Again,
this just putting in that little bit of extra work gave them the sense when we were meeting them that like they knew we were on top of our shit. We knew who they were, and it loosened them up to give their best audition. And we saw tremendous actors in Austin. I was worried we weren't going to find the people we needed. We had more than we needed. Great things, and had to have great discussions to try to figure out like who the cast is going to be. And we submitted the cast that we wanted to HBO, and they accepted everybody that we had cast in the show. And so then that's early January. We had a couple of months then to start emailing them and communicating with them and talking them through what our thinking was, what we thought their character was going to be, what their journey was going to be, feeding them pages of the script as we completed them until we finally had the whole script. And once we got to Austin, we landed on a Sunday. We had a dress rehearsal, a costume fitting on Monday, rehearsals on Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday night, we had a press, and then we ran the show Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 1 week on the ground there, and only 2 days of rehearsal. And 450 pages of script and 100 pages of blocking. And the night before, Bonnie and I went out with our team and the actors to have a bite to eat. And the actors came busting my balls about like, hey, are we going to get a script on this thing? You going to send us any pages so we know what you want us to say? And, the first time or two, it's funny. And then, my anger, my hate tumor starts coming up and I start getting pissed off. And we went home and I drank a lot of wine because I was like, what the hell have we done? How could we expect these people to know 450 pages of script, blah, 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 blah. We get to the thing the next day and Bonnie and I strategize, what are we going to do? Okay, so David's going to stage everything. Then he and Tara will move forward, stage the next scene. Bonnie will come behind, work with the actors, make sure they understand it. Lila will follow behind, take any notes if they got any questions. We go to stage the first scene and none of the actors have their scripts in their hands. They're delivering the lines completely memorized. They're moving to where they're supposed to. They have the blocking memorized already. It took like 4 minutes to do. I was like, well, that was very impressive. I hope the rest of you were up to that. And we move on to the next scene and they were ready. We move on to the next scene. They were ready. By the time we were done, of the 51 actors, like all but 4 or 5 of them, like were completely word perfect. And those who weren't, sidled up to me at some point and said, I'll be off book by the end of the day. And they nearly were already. And that level of preparation on our part and on their part really made all the difference in the world. Because then what we had is we had 2 days to really, really dial it in and work on the nuances of things and get them to the point where they were just chomping at the bit to do the next part that was very important, which was to then let the script go and allow them to just breathe and interact in their world and allow in guests who could interact with them and take them on detours away from the script we've written, knowing that there was a way to get back on there. And if any of them ever got lost, they'd sidle up to Bonnie or Tara or Lila and me and say, where are we? You're in Act 1, Scene 2. Gotcha, great. And they'd be right back on track again. So it was preparation and a great deal of trust that got us there.
That's fantastic. As actually a former citizen of Batu, I was often put into that situation where, you know, a guest comes up and points at the X-Wing and asks me what it is, and you have to say, no, I don't know what that is, you know, scrap metal. But it's great to hear you guys talk about how much you love your actors and support your team. Hard to find these days, and it's so important.
The people are everything, as Cliff has said before, whether it's, you know, producers, designers, writers, supervisors, directors, actors. The people make it happen, or they make it not happen. And when you have great people, you empower them, you trust them, and then you hold them accountable. Of course, obviously, they have to be on top of their stuff. You can just accomplish great stuff.
That's fantastic.
The reality is you don't know where the great idea is going to come from. You don't, you know, it's we brainstorm and we throw ideas onto the wall, and sometimes it's, you know, a surprise that maybe the producer or one of the technical managers or even, you know, one of the interns says something that just sets the light bulb, and everybody's just grabs onto it and grows it into something wonderful.
Or in the case of our actors, a lot of times our actors are the ones that bring, because they are allowed to go off script within the parameters. We've had full scenes play out because an actor went off on an improv, and it's like, oh, that's what it is now. Do that every single time, and that's very helpful. And when you give them the space and have the trust in your actors, that's been a lot of the reason for a lot of good creative ideas.
That's awesome.
When you make the goals clear and you tell everybody this is what we're working towards, then everybody can participate to make it something special.
One team, one dream.
I think it's communication, and it's giving respect.
Yep.
Of course. So how did you guys let actors know, or did actors know that they were doing something incredible? How was the response to that?
It was funny because after Blade Runner, there were several actors. Brad Hills, for example, who played the sheriff in Westworld. He plays the captain at Dark Harbor. He was one of the cops at Blade Runner. He almost passed on the opportunity to do Westworld because he really didn't believe that we could do any better than we did at Blade Runner. You know, the the critical reception that we got to that was so extraordinary, and the experience was so different than anything that we'd done before. It was like, yeah, that's fine. I'm good with that one. And you know, when we were working on Westworld in Austin, you know, one of the owners, Mark Simons, great guy, came up to me while we were rehearsing, and there was a small break, and he said, boy, you know, Blade Runner really put us on the map. And I said, I got a feeling this one's going to make the map a lot bigger, Mark, you know, because I knew the work that we had done. And I already at that point could see how great the actors were doing. And I was looking around at all the work that they had done on the sets and everything. And it was like, you felt like it was special, you know, and then you don't know how it's playing. But when we saw the press reacting to it that Thursday night, it seemed like we were doing okay. And then the next day, Friday, we could definitely see the guests were. So we knew in our hearts that it was going very, very well. And then the media piece started kicking in, and the stuff online, and just one was on top of the other one. And you know, all of us have worked on big things. Bonnie's toured with Beauty and the Beast. Cliff's made a couple of theme parks. I've you know, had a couple of movies that have been produced. People have seen our work. We've had great success. There was something for me personally about Westworld that was just like above the clouds a little bit, you know, that it was just like something that had really pierced the culture in a way that was different than other things I'd experienced.
And I think Giant Spoon finding the ghost town gave a great opportunity. You know, who doesn't want to convert a ghost town into, you know, the Old West, you know, and here it was, got to be turned into a modern version of what the Old West was. So what a palette to start with. What a canvas.
I also think that it gave audiences a level of immersion that no one had really experienced yet. Like immersive theaters at the time was still kind of a new concept. I know they had, you know, Sleep No More in New York, and they had a couple of elements like that, but it wasn't really on a national scale yet. And I think that Westworld really opened a mass audience up to the idea of immersive experiences.
I think Bonnie's exactly right. I think it really truly was where people would have liked to have done something that really, you could smell it, you could taste it. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't inside a building, you know, that was theatrical sets. You know, it wasn't a theme park that's like very well designed, but you know you're in a creative place. This truly felt like you're in it, the dusty roads and the buildings and the people. You really, really felt at that brand activation that you were inside the show.
That's awesome, guys. That's really exciting to hear. And with a 450-page script, I mean, that sounds like an out of the clouds project. That's great. So what was opening day like? Was opening day as wonderful as you guys planned?
Well, the other great thing that you don't always have with all your activations or theme parks is what's your throughput going to be like, and because we had so much space, we could really handle a lot of guests being there. And you'd have some people, one of the things they got when they came is they got a cowboy hat, black or white hat they could choose. And they got 2 tokens that allowed them 2 cocktails when they were there. And you certainly had some people who were there for okay, I'm at Southwest, I got my cowboy hat, I got my 2 tokens, I'm ready to get back on the shuttle and go back. And then you had a good amount of people who really wanted to stay there for a couple of hours, and maybe they'd see the first loop and then they'd try something different. They'd get their cocktails. There was a way to barter sometimes with some people to earn an additional token, and additional some people do that. But then we also had this formidable amount of people that spent 7, 8, 9 hours there and did everything. We always talk about in our business that you got your waiters, the people that want to stick their toe in the water and just see what it's like. It's fine. Your swimmers who want to get in there, swim around a little bit, have a good time. And then your waiters who want to deep dive and see everything, touch everything, experience everything. And we had a lot of those people at Westworld.
But imagine being the actor and having Steven Spielberg walk up to you and say, "Who directed this?" And the actor has to stay in character and say, "What do you mean, sir, directed this? I don't understand what you're talking about." And poor David won't get credit for Steven Spielberg because the actors are doing a good job.
One of the great saves we had on Westworld was there was this line from the show that guests would not, the host would not recognize anachronisms, because if you showed them something from contemporary times, they would just say, "That doesn't look like anything to me." So anytime that anybody tried to bust them being in character, they could always just retreat back to that line. So
it's unfortunate though, because after that, when we had to write for these other IPs, we didn't have that anymore. That was such a fail safe. An actor could save themselves in any way, but just by saying, "Well, that doesn't look like anything to me," and it was directly from the show, and everyone understood it, and everyone connected to it. And then when we moved into other IPs, we're like, "Oh, we've got to find something else that isn't that."
But, and a lot of people, after that, wanted Westworld, they and it's you can't have Westworld. Westworld was its own specific thing. And I think that's partly going back to what Bonnie was saying. What made Westworld so special was the show Westworld, the conceit of the show Westworld is people in an immersive environment. So it's very meta what we did, that we were doing an immersive environment about a show that's about an immersive environment. It really, really lent itself to being successful if we didn't screw it up. The challenge then on these other projects was to find what it was about their intellectual property that made it compelling, and that what was it about their intellectual property that we could gain an entry point for guests to come in and interact with the denizens of that world that were different than the Westworld universe.
Totally get what you mean by a catch-all phrase. In Star Wars land, ours was only the ancients know. Whenever a guest tries to trip you up, only the ancients know.
There you go.
Yeah. But what was the aftermath of this project like?
2 or 3 years of nonstop work.
That's awesome.
Which was great. It was a terrific ride. We continued doing those design services work that we love doing. We continued doing all of the development stuff that we love doing. But on the live part, it really became one thing after the other. We went from Westworld to doing Fallout 76 with Bethesda and Pure Partner, which went into doing the Inkhole again with Giant Spoon, and the film Happy Time Murders. That was another extraordinary production. It was we had live actors and we had puppeteers who were doing these puppet characters in a speakeasy in Hollywood, on Hollywood Boulevard, that mirrored the sort of criminal lair that existed in the movie. And that was another one that people came and just wouldn't leave. They just wanted to stay all night long.
That's awesome. I love when guests connect with experiences like that. It just makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside. It's great.
Yeah, it's a total payoff.
And one of the great things about working with great partners like Bonnie or Arroyo Carrion, who works with us, David Ruziga, who's worked with us, is that you can trust them to take part of this thing and divide and conquer a little bit. You know, I was able with Bonnie, we had set so many spaces to cover with Westworld that Bonnie was able to go and specialize with, you know, a couple of the different locations and like own that sector. With the Inkhole, I dealt mostly with the actors, and Bonnie specialized working with the puppeteers and everything and keep making sure they were good. With Game of Thrones, as I mentioned, you know, she took the inside and the oratorio where I took the war camp. So, you know, as Bonnie said earlier, you know, we complete each other's sentences and we worked with each other. There's so much trust that, you know, then when it came time to like, wait a second, now we have to do completely different projects that I'm not going to be there to help out with her. She's not going to be there to help out with me. She was able to take Horror Made Here and just own it, you know, while I was off doing Dark Harbor. And we knew then that both productions were being managed and led in the way that we wanted them to. And going back to what Cliff said, that allows us to grow. You know, last year we had a Dark Harbor and a Dark Horizon. So Arroyo was able to take care of Long Beach. David Ruziga was able to take care of Orlando. And then I was in the position, as Danny Hardigan had been with on Bollywood and Motion Gate, being the executive creative director on both. I then became the executive on both Dark Harbor and Dark Horizon, and would check in with Arroyo, support her when she needed it, check in with David, support where he needed it. And you know, for the most part, you know, after a week or two, they didn't need me at all, you know. So I was able to start then planning for the next things that we had down the road that were coming and get ahead of those things a little bit.
That's awesome. That really speaks to your character and the character of your company as well. We've heard that you guys did another Westworld experience for the last season, which is very different. What's about that?
We did two very unique ones. One of them was very small. It was called Wired, and it was at this conference in San Francisco for Wired 25, it was called. And we set up a booth that was like, think of this conference taking place in this one building, multiple floors. And on the first floor, a couple of people had booths to talk about what their product was about. And ours was for Insight, the company that's a character in the third season of the program that was selling all of this futuristic technology. And we cast these actors to be representatives of that company. And the attendees of this conference were like, the Secretary of Defense was there, the CEO for Facebook and Instagram and Yahoo and all these things were there. And all of these people were coming through this booth, and our characters were selling them on this company, Insight. And people thought it was completely a real thing. We never marketed that it was a Westworld thing. But they completely bought that it was real. So it was very, very successful. And then a month or two after that, in early January of this year, we hosted an event at CES that consisted of 3 dinners, 60 attendees at the dinner. And these attendees were at 10 different tables. And we had waiters who came and took their orders. And they were all representatives of Insight. And what we had to do for that was we had to know everything there was to know about the guests who were attending, so that which was teeing up the whole theme of data mining and people knowing too much about people's lives that the show was going to explore. So it was fantastic. Again, tremendously heavy lift, probably one of the hardest things we've ever written or had to execute. But everybody on the team, the writers, the stage managers, and the actors did a brilliant, flawless job.
That's awesome. All right. Thank you guys so much. I think we're going to transition to Dave really quick.
Hey, Dave.
Hey, guys. I actually got to get going at 1:30 here, but I really wanted to tap into, while we had you guys and our audience here, I wanted to ask our audience, first of all, guys, if you guys have any questions for our guests, please just comment on the videos and on either YouTube or Facebook. We are, monitoring them, and we'll be able to throw them up and ask our questions. I think I'm going to let Alex take over and kind of, guide us through some of these questions we have. And I think we have one from Emmanuel. But thank you guys so much for coming on. It really is not a surprise how successful you guys are, just based on the way you guys, talk about working with people and your priorities and your mindset. It's incredible. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you.
So I'll see you guys later. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
All right. Emmanuel Bradshaw Design wants to know, what would be the best advice you can give me or someone who is about to graduate and is about to start looking for new opportunities during this time?
I think you always build your own luck and your own opportunity. You have to put yourself, if you're going to take a job, try to find one that puts you in the environment that you want to be going into. Even working in a park gives you great experience of understanding how the park functions and what the creative is and what it really means to be part of that world. And so, don't look down on an operations job if it gives you that experience and allows you an insight onto the industry you want to be a part of. And those internships, PA positions, all open doors. We hire from within a lot. We have an intern that, she started as an intern, and next thing you know, she's with us for 3 years. It's not, and has become a creative associate. So it's not, it's about getting the opportunity to show that you have something to offer.
That's, Cliff, you touched on something I was about to say, is don't get hung up on titles. That's the thing. First of all, titles in this industry mean nothing. There's no standard of title in this industry at all. Everyone's maybe doing the exact same job and have a different title at every single company. Stop putting it in your head that I'm only going to be a creative director, or I'm only going to be a writer, or I'm only going to be a this. It's a fool's errand. You will shoot yourself in the foot. Just stop that. Then secondly is, exactly what Cliff said, which is do the work you want to do, or just be around the work you want to do. But I so many people are like, well, someone offers me a production management job, but I'm really looking for, coordination management. It's like, that's the same thing.
There's no title and there's no program, so I think that people that get hung up wanting, the individual pat on the back, I appreciate it and I understand it from a human nature thing, but truly the one team, one dream is philosophy is meant to reflect that whatever success is derived it comes to all of us. It's everybody who works on the project is crucial to that success, not the person who has this title or the person who has that role or that thing. None of it can be done unless everybody's in there. My work can't be good unless another 20 people are doing the best work they can do. And the reason they get hired is because they're smarter and more talented than I am. So just know that the glory reflects on you as much as it does on people who you might think are at a higher level than you in a company or a project.
And I think a lot of the mistakes that people make is they get obsessed with working for WDI. You have to remember, the bigger the beast, the smaller the pigeonhole. And what happens in big companies is you get pigeonholed really easily. Smaller companies allow you to do multiple jobs in one opportunity. It's the experience. Sometimes you get more experience by being with a bootstrap company, than you get from being in the big beast. The big beast puts you on project with big budgets, but it also means it has a lot of people fighting for those roles and a lot of politics and a lot of games being played. When I left Disney and went back to Universal, I opened 5 attractions in 3 years, and they still hadn't opened the 5 attractions that I did concept development for Tokyo Disney Sea. So that just elevated me and projected me into my role as a producer, 10 times faster than if I would have stayed at Disney. So in those things, I think you have to keep your eyes open. There's a lot of incredible work. Universal's doing just as important theme parks now as Disney. The work at PortAventura was incredible. Europa Park has been doing beautiful work under Chris Lang. The creative of Chris Lang, that he delivered to that park during his tenure there, has really elevated parks. These parks that are outside of the big gorillas of Disney and Universal now.
I'd say the other thing, if we're addressing specifically that group of people who are coming out of colleges, I know you've been in school for a long time and you might feel like, okay, I'm done with all this learning stuff, but you never stop being a student. If you're really good, you never ever stop learning. I learned stuff on every film that I worked on. I never felt like, oh, now I've arrived, now I know everything. I learned so much about location-based entertainment that I knew nothing about when I worked with Cliff and his partners at Thinkwell. I knew nothing about it before then. I knew nothing about Halloween events before I took the job on Dark Harbor, and I learned. I knew nothing about brand activations or that they even existed until we did Blade Runner 2049. But when you have these opportunities to learn and you trust yourself enough and you collaborate well with the people around you and know you're surrounded by people all over an office or all over production that have answers to things that you may not know the answers to, you just talk to people, and you investigate and you learn and you try things out. And sometimes you learn things on the shoulders of people who've done things before you. And sometimes by never having had the experience, you learn things and create new paradigms because nobody ever thought about them before. And you're able to figure them out on your own, which is very rewarding.
I will say that I had the opportunity to work operations before becoming a show writer. And that experience was probably more valuable than most of my writing positions in the past. It's really important to me to watch how guests interact with things, especially I had the unique opportunity of having to teach people how to use the My Disney Experience app and some of the Star Wars games apps. And as we moved forward to digital things, learning how to teach a guest that, learning how they interact with that has been really important to my own professional development as a writer and just as a theme park person.
Absolutely.
The best writers are writers who have been actors. The best directors are directors who have been actors. Great writers are also great directors. It's all of it's intermingled, and it's the same in the theme park industry as well. If you go to a bunch of parks as a guest, you know what a good guest experience is. If you've been a ride operator, you know how to write. You know how to write flow. Because you as a ride operator, as you're writing, oh, no, this is going to jam up the entire situation because I know how I, as a ride operator, have seen how guests interact with things. And that goes to the stop getting hung up on jobs, stop getting hung up on job titles. Everything's going to help everything else. The best producers also have great creative minds. So it really does behoove you and the entire industry to have an understanding of all of it.
I think Bonnie just tapped on something that's really important too. I think something that makes our company work well is that our producers are very creative people and they have great creative ideas. And I think that most of our creatives have an understanding of the producerial process and what decisions will need to be made at some point in the process when you get to, once you've had the big ideas and you have to value engineer down to what's achievable, what's affordable. Is it then that's another creative process of how do you still do everything you want to do with maybe less resources?
Of course.
We had a question come in from the audience that I thought was a great one. What were some of your biggest external inspirations in creating the unique style of immersive theater events that Mycotoo creates? I thought that was a good question.
It's great. A couple of things. One for me, when Cliff and I, back when we were in our first or second set of being 39 years old, back in the day, there was a project called Tamara. That was an immersive theater project up in Los Angeles where people would come into this big mansion and they could divert in different storylines to go throughout the thing, follow different characters through it. Tony and Tina's Wedding, in a way, was that same type of thing where you had characters who were real characters that could come up and interact with you in this production. Sleep No More is a fantastic production where you can follow storylines all over this building. So a lot of those things, for me, were touchdowns and thinking about like how to approach it. But for me, the biggest thing about doing great work in immersive theater, straight theater, or film is to really study life, and just how human beings work and how they interact with each other and how they reveal themselves and hide themselves from people and make choices all day long. We do it effortlessly. We do it as effortlessly as breathing. And yet when you then try to take those aspects of being a compelling, interesting human being and apply it to show, that's where sometimes, you find that actors sometimes are better suited to doing film work where they can just do multiple takes and focus on getting one moment right that can be intercut with another moment, or a theatrical actor that's just there doing stuff that's demonstrative, for people to sit back and applaud. Oh, you're such a wonderful actor. Immersive theater acting, is what you're really looking for. Is you're looking for somebody who's fearless at a cocktail party to go up there and introduce themselves to people that they don't know, and engage in a conversation or join a group of people, because that's really what you're trying to do when you get to these immersive things. Is your guests have come in cold to this cold atmosphere that they don't know how to engage with, and they're looking for people who are going to let them in and play along with them. I don't know. How about Cliff or Monty? What do you guys think?
I mean, I grew up in Southern California, and I have very vivid, clear memories of Calico Ghost Town in Knott's Berry Farm, and the gunfights that would happen in the streets, or the train being robbed, or the stage ride, where in my mind was real. As a kid, I was immersed in that environment, and it was so real to me. And I think being able to deliver that in experiences is, it's a cool experience. When we did Temple de Fuego at Portaventura, it was an immersive environment. The performer brought you in, and you believed you were actually exploring this temple with this performer. And then to be in the space and watch it catch on fire in front of your eyes, you were there, and the fireball was coming at you, and the brain fire was 6 feet from your head, and how you couldn't get more immersed in it. And watching people run out of the building because they thought they were going to catch on fire was, priceless. It's the greatest moment in a producer's life, is to watch what you did just had an emotional connection with people. And I think it's live performance helps make that emotional connection. As much as I do VR or simulators and stuff, they have their place in that. But man, when there's a live performer and they can connect to you and interact with you, I think those are the strongest memories I have of visiting any park, is those moments where I connected with a character, and that's, it'll never go away. Having an actor come from a stunt show and sit next to you, and you're like, oh, that actor's sitting next to me. It's like
a character is.
Yeah, it's you're sucked in. So I think that's exciting.
Bonnie?
Actually, a lot of where I pull any kind of immersive theater direction that I'm doing, a lot of my schooling and experience in the past, I grew up in a children's theater environment. I actually ran a children's theaters programs. I do a lot of my writing concentration is in young adult, in that kind of young adult age and area. And the beauty about children's theater, aside from it being my all-time favorite kind of theater, because never are you able to get such a call and response with an audience. A room of kids are going to let you know real fast when they're bored, which I completely appreciate. And the other beauty about children's theater is, even when it's not considered immersive, even when it's a traditional proscenium and an audience watching, it always still is immersive, because kids are responding vocally, kids are responding with their bodies, kids are responding and it really allows actors to play off of an audience in a way that you can't in other styles of theater. And I think each one of our actors that we choose for an immersive activation, they have to be their own writer, producer, and actor all at the same time, which is why some of them are, you get very lovely, wonderful, amazing actors in these areas sometimes who just can't quite get the immersive element to it because it's out of their wheelhouse. But they very much, like in children's theater, they are guiding audiences and they're responding to audiences in real time. And that's what I liken it to the most and appreciate the most about it.
That's great. Only one technical glitch today. That's not bad, everybody.
I had a quick question that we try to ask everybody when they come on, but with everybody out there and everything that's happening in the world, do you have any advice for people, new people, or didn't realize they were about to be new people to this industry, that are trying to reach out and like connect with people that they want to learn from or talk to or somehow network with?
when I graduated from graduate school, I'd been in college straight for 8 years of postgraduate after high school. And I moved up to Chicago, and I had a great internship at the Goodman Theater, and then I got a great job working as a casting director's assistant. And I really felt like, I'm ready for the world to just open its arms to me. And I got a lesson really fast that the world's not just sitting out there waiting for David Wally to open their arms to me. And I had so many friends of mine that kept saying to me, just do a show, put a show up, and I kept waiting to be asked to do a show, or I kept waiting for the right circumstances to just suddenly align and appear for me to do a show. And after a year and a half of being frozen, I decided, thankfully my sister helped to guide me towards this decision to just move again, start fresh in Los Angeles. And I moved out here, and my mindset when I got here was I was ready to pay my dues. I was ready to start looking for what could the opportunity be and not be so precious about what it is that I wanted to do. And what I took from that is that you can't wait for something to come to you. You can't wait for an opportunity to come to you. You have to go out there. And as Cliff said, luck is where preparation meets opportunity. You have to put yourself into as many positions to succeed as you possibly can. You have to be unafraid to go knock on the door of a theater and say, I'm willing to work here for a couple of months for free if I can, to get your foot in the door. You have to be unafraid to, as Patrick Kling did to me a couple of months ago, send me a message and saying, hey, can we chat? I don't know you. I'd like to get to know your story, which was wonderful, and then we had a lovely conversation, and now here I am talking to you people. And Patrick and I didn't know each other personally a couple of months ago. So that is a constant thing in life, I think, is to continue to try to get to meet more people, to do more things, to see more things, and to give yourself more chances to succeed. Think of yourself as having 1,000 arrows in your quiver and just keep shooting them in the air. And pretty soon one of them is going to stick.
There's something that's very helpful in the themed entertainment industry and in the entertainment industry. People love talking about themselves. You give people the opportunity.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You reach out to someone and say, I want to hear your story, as opposed to help me get a job. It's going to open a door a little bit wider for you. And then it's an opportunity for someone to go, hey, you want to have me talk about me for 45 minutes? I'm there. So
I think I stepped away from the film industry because theme park industry was open arms. They appreciated what talent you brought to the table, and they let you do the work, and they appreciated it. They were grateful that you jumped on board, So, and I think in that sense, as an industry, we will talk to you. I'm always talking to young people, and I like doing it. I like encouraging them to, if you really want to do it, dive in. So I think most of us are approachable. TEA has their next gen program, which is really strong. I think IAPA has a good, is trying to develop a young professional program as well. So I think take advantage of those things, but don't be afraid. If there's a company you're interested in, you have to be respectful of people's time. So when you come in, don't, think about that clock, try to keep your visit into that 30-minute window. And if it goes longer, great. But remember, it's, respect people's that are in here. And then, best time to network is when you have a job. When you're not searching for a job, you should be out there meeting everybody, because you're no threat. You can have a coffee and not feel like you're just there to try to get a job from me.
Gentleman who I talked about earlier, David Ruzica, and I had, I think, 3 or 4 coffee meetings, over a 2-year period before there was an opportunity at Mycotoo where we needed a writer. And at that time, that moment came that Bonnie was busy on something and I was busy on something, and we needed a new writer. It was like, let's give David a crack. He's a good guy and we like him. Let's bring him in and see if he works out. But don't be shy, and don't be afraid, because if you don't ask, the answer is always no.
I think there's also an element to just how we've been talking about this entire thing, the theme of kind of being a jack of all trades and not getting so wrapped up into something. I think when you do talk to somebody too, ask what holes need to be filled in their company. If you come in and say, I'm a writer only, but it's like, oh, what are you looking for now? I think understanding what positions people are having a hard time filling will help you get a sense of where you can put a foot in the door.
No programs. If you don't know Keynote or PowerPoint, if you're a non-Mac user, learn it. If you don't know Excel, learn it. You know, these things are industry standard tools that you're going to need to know how to use. You know, you're a designer, learn AutoCAD. You know, you have to know how to use these programs because you'll be using them every day when you come to work.
I just want to just validate that Cliff was very much around in 2000, 2008, 2009 when I was trying to get my land in the industry the first time when the industry was kind of collapsing. And it's really much appreciated, Cliff, very much appreciated, you know, and I just wanted to say thank you that, you know, you were definitely there with open arms, willing to talk to me, a young Patrick, passionate, not knowing what the heck to do. So I appreciate that.
You know, your industry is dependent on the next generation, you know, and it's the new thinking each time that keeps us moving forward and staying ahead of our audience. And so in that sense, I always enjoy the energy that people can bring to the company. And, you know, as much as, you know, as I get older, I'm realizing I'm one of the old guys in the industry, and that's painful. But, you know, it's, you know, when I don't know when that happened, but it happened. And it's, you know, but it's,
You're only 39.
Yeah,
exactly. I don't know what he's talking about.
David's the one that holds on to 39. I'm a proud 57. So, you know, so
Jesus Christ, what are you doing?
You know, I just
Cliff was much older than me in college.
I've been watching David reinvent 39 for so many years. It's not funny, but it's, you know, and those things. I love the people that work in this industry. I think, and the people that come here with a passion and want to get in it. I'd love to see people get in it that have a passion for it. You know, I don't have any time, but you know, anybody that comes with an ego or they think they're God's gift to the world, you know, maybe there's another company for you to deal with, you know, because we have to collaborate and we'll respect you and we'll show respect. But at the same time, you know, there's only one Walt Disney and everybody wants to be him. And the reality is you don't have his DNA. You know, you can be as great as him or you may be able to surpass him, but you're not going to be him. So go out and be yourself and find your own path to be great and you'll do it. And it's easy to do. It's why we always survive. It's why this industry continues to move forward and grow and change. And it's incredible and it's fun to go for the ride.
And by the way, that's not to say don't be confident. That's not to say don't be bold in your thinking. Just, I think what Cliff's saying is also understand that you're part of a team, you know, and don't come in thinking you're a lone wolf that's going to go your own way in spite of what everybody else is trying to achieve. But absolutely bring bold thinking when you to your work.
There's a certain humility needed to working in a team environment, but like, you know, having bold ideas and being confident in your work is one thing, but like, I definitely understand.
I'm a confident person. That's not been one of my weaknesses. You know, I'm confident, but I'm also realistic of what I don't do well. You know, and that's why I love collaboration. I can't write. I'm never going to be a writer, and I surround myself with writers because they fill the gap of what I don't do. But if you want to talk about people or you want to talk about seeing time or managing money, I do those really well, and that's what I bring to the table. You know, but in those things, you know, I think it's important to make sure you see people's traits. When I go back to traits are key, you know, hire from people's traits, hire that person that you can think add to your team and fill a gap that's missing and brings a different perspective or a new perspective. You know, it's, you know, give me the exotic person that thinks different. You know, Free for Jindum is an incredible muse for me. She comes from a direction of creative that I would never think of. David's been a consistent creative in my life, you know, since college. And then Seth Kober, he shares my brain. I never seen, you know, he's a better producer than I am. He's passed me up, you know, 10 years ago as a great producer, you know, and I love that. I think that's amazing. So we're fortunate. We got a fortunate, you know, I have a great partnership.
And communication is key. We have 4 alpha dogs in our partnership, and we meet every single week to a specific meeting and talk to each other every day, that in 9 years, there have certainly been things that we have not agreed with, but we talk and we talk and we talk. And when it comes to decision times, we don't have split decisions. We keep talking until we have unanimity and we can all be on the same page and say, okay, that's what the four of us together are saying is the right thing to do. And if we're not all four on the same page, then it's a key to us that we have to keep talking a little bit more.
One of the things that I learned early on when I was still doing theater in college is the importance of saying our production or our team and not saying my production or my team, understanding that Rome wasn't built in a day and we all built Rome. So, that kind of lexicon to me, both at Disney and while I was still working in theater was really important.
It is. And I can guarantee you as a writer and as a speaker, I have to remind myself still at this advanced age of 39 to try to not begin sentences with I, to try to not relate experiences of I did. And yet we're all also human beings. So we also have to understand that everybody tells their story from their perspective. Cliff and I have been together for 40 years. There are definitely things that we've done together that he has a different perspective of than I might have, just because he had a different angle to it than my angle was. May have had a different experience to it than mine was. So I think it's also okay to talk about what your unique, specific experience is without having to say you're the only reason that it was a wonderful thing, which is where you cross over into feeling like you're dealing with a raging ego.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So on that note, excuse me, how important do you guys think location is? We've talked a little bit about you guys being out in LA, and I think most of us on this side are out in Orlando. How important do you guys think location is now, in the past, and in the future?
I always say if you want to do Broadway, you better be in New York. You're not, don't go to LA to go to Broadway. It's as much as you can do some theater here, you immerse yourself. I mean, Florida, Orlando's become a strong location for theme parks, especially in operations. There is creative groups there. LA still has the big creative companies. It started in Burbank with Disney and it actually started with Knott's Berry Farm. Theme park started there, and it was the vision of that. So Southern California has that long-term DNA, but over the last 10 years, both coasts have strong design companies. We're based in LA because the talent pool's here. I can run we can run a tight team and ramp up I wouldn't have been able to ramp up, 160 people in less than 6 months, not being in LA. The talent pool between not just the theme park industry, but animation, film, television, gaming, all that is, the hearts of those are here, and the talent pool that support those are here. And when I have to build a team when the industry's busy, I have to pull from those groups. Half of the Riva team came from Circus LA, because the Reese closed and there was all these people stranded in LA that were very talented, and brought a new perspective. I think part of the success of the DreamWorks land was there was a whole new perspective looking at that land, and a mixture of theme park people and non-theme park people made it a different experience. So I think the coast, it's hard because it's, right now there was a lot of opportunity that drew a lot of people to Orlando. And there's always going to be another attraction opening and another opportunity to be in the field and stuff like that. But at the same time, you have a lot of big players here in Los Angeles that, we have a partner in Barcelona, Victor Arca. We had to think, where in Europe do we want to have our second office? And that's Barcelona is a good central place that people like to go to and are comfortable to go to, and it's easy to travel from there. So I think Victor, when working with, Chris Langs in Germany, it's these players are all important, and we're all figuring out how to deal with each other globally. But you can choose either coast, and you just have to dive in there.
And we have a lot of international clients as well. So, oftentimes you have to do work early in the morning or later at night. You have to do things telecommunicatively. Technology allows us to do this. Our team during quarantine has able to, work remotely quite a bit of time. But in an ideal situation, it's always better to have people in the same space and that can sit around the table and look across the table at each other, and while there's the ability sometimes to work remotely, it's not the ideal, so, and I think it's harder for you unless you're really super established to be somebody who can say, well, you know what, I'm gonna move to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I'm gonna do all my work from there. It's okay, and you might have some good opportunities, you might have some good relationships, but there's going to be times when the company's going to want you around the table in the office or present to present to clients and stuff like that, and then it becomes burdensome if you have to fly in and things like that. So I think in general, as Cliff's saying, if you want to be in the location-based entertainment business, you probably want to be in Orlando or Los Angeles, and there's pros and cons to both depending on what angle you want to take getting into the business.
I definitely think on the creative end, there's probably more opportunity on the West Coast for the creative, but on the operations and technical, there's really strong shops and stuff in Orlando. So if you're coming more from a tech background or from an operations background, there's so much more operations opportunity in Orlando. So if you want to be in the live entertainment group and work with a live entertainment group, Orlando has more opportunity, and, if you want to be the early creative part of it, not that there's not creative companies in Orlando, it's just there's more in LA.
The other thing I'd say, and the younger people may not even have this mindset at all. When Cliff and I were young, we had parents who might have worked for one company for most of their life, or one or two companies. If you're going to be in this business, know that this is primarily a project-based business, and you're going to have a lot of jobs in your career, and you're going to move around a lot from company to company, from project to project, and getting used to that mentality and not letting that be something that scares you, but excites you, that there's the opportunities to work for Mycotoo and then go work for Hedema or go work for Thinkwell or Disney or something like that, and come back to us, 2 or 3 projects down the line and bring back all the experience that you've gained and the wisdom that you've gained, and we'll have a different experience the next time we work together.
And the reality is our budgets don't allow us to relocate people, so that's always taken into consideration when we're building a team is, where is that person able to work and come in and collaborate? As much as we're all doing Zoom and stuff, the collaboration still is so much stronger in person. The brainstorming and the interaction and that in real time in the same facility is so much stronger, So I don't know if we're fully ready to jump into everybody being all over the world as a company. We adapt some for it, but the reality is I'm probably going to pick someone local over someone that, we just don't have they don't give us the budget to relocate. Yeah. We're beaten up every day for our proposals and what the cost is. And, so in that sense, our ability to relocate.
And oftentimes the window of opportunity for a gig can be small. We might finally get approval from that client. We've been waiting for weeks to say yes, and then immediately once they say yes, great, we want to start on Monday. It's like, okay, got to find the right person to put on this thing if we don't have somebody.
Something that David said, which is this is project based, and for anybody out there who's about to get into this, you will be let go at some point, and hopefully it's not any fault. Right, it's just going to happen, and it's of course hopefully not any fault of yours. But if you go around bad mouthing the company, or if you say some nasty things on Twitter, or whatever that case may be, it's going to hurt your reputation very, very quickly.
It's a small world.
It's a very small world. So just be aware. Don't take those kinds of things personally, and don't shoot yourself in the foot when they inevitably happen. Everyone here has been fired from a gig because the money ran out. It just happens.
And I personally, I wish everybody all the best at all the other companies. The industry is only stronger if our collaborators and our competitors are doing well, because that means the industry is going to do better. It's going to be more people are wanting to enjoy themed entertainment, live entertainment, and more productions will happen. The world's never going to stop spinning. There's always going to be something else coming up the next year. And I want everybody to do great work. I root for everybody.
So that's a great segue into our last question. So thanks for taking the time to be on the show. I know how important we have dozens and dozens of people watching, and we have a lot of people that are going to watch it later. I know we went way longer than we thought we ever would, which we always do with amazing people like yourself. So I appreciate it. We started this show just because we knew we were facing a lot of uncertain times, and we wanted to expose people who didn't know companies that existed like yourself. This is why we started the show. You have very unique perspective spanning decades, or maybe half a decade, right? Over 39. But do you have any like parting words you want to give our audience? Maybe inspirational words about the industry, where it's going, and people that are feeling discouraged right now.
I mean,
you guys.
This is the hardest. This is the hardest crisis that we've had to survive, at least in my career. It's the uncertainty of knowing when it might be able to come back is the hardest thing. The unknown. We all believe and we know that as a vaccine or whatever, or better treatment,
therapeutics,
curve this, that people will be able to start coming back out. And as humans, we want to be in groups and we want to go socialize. And so it will come back. And when it starts to come back, I do believe there'll probably be a boom, and there'll be a hunger to get things back online and to have new things for people to come through. So as people, once they can start seeing that maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel, it will come, and we'll thrive again, And so now it's how do you survive, and what experience can I get right now just in the survival for the next 6 months, even to the year? Think of what things can help you advance your career. Think about what skills you can add, and take advantage of these moments. Instead of feeling sorry for yourself, go out and learn a new skill, learn a new software, or become experts on Keynote or whatever, so that when things do start ramping up, you'll be the first to be rehired. You'll be the first person that can offer something, and we'll come back. Our industry's very resilient, and people, whether it's working for an FEC or a full theme park or a museum, all these location-based entertainment components are going to have their life again, and we'll deal with whatever changes we have to add, whether there has to be a plastic, shield in front of somebody, that's taking your ticket. We'll see, and I don't think it's going to be long term. We survived a pandemic, 100 years ago. We'll survive this one. We just stay healthy, be smart about how you take care of yourself and your personal space, and have good friends and family that surround you, and we are a family industry where our team at Mycotoo is one big family, and that helps us survive.
Be positive, be optimistic, and say yes to opportunities.
I think if the train doesn't stop at your station, it wasn't your train.
Well, what a way to end the show. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Alex, thank you very much for taking the time to be a guest host with us. Kelly, Dave, wherever you are the other day, we appreciate you, as always, tuning in. And we'll have to put him at the front of the show next time because he always, because I know he can't do his thing.
He has to learn how to schedule better. He should get on the program now. He's, things are running long.
Yeah, we ran long. It's just like Matt Damon and Jimmy Kimmel. So for our guests, please stay on for just a moment, but I'm going to end the show. So bye, everybody. And we thank you all for being here, okay? Bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys, this was great.
Thank you.